All right. So today, this is going to be quick. All right. Let's go to Revelation 8:13. The Screaming Eagles. Okay, guys, this is almost closing time, and if you have any blind spots, they should be exposed by now, right? Okay. That's what Top Gun training is for, right? It's because when you go into battle, it's going to be with a real enemy. It's not going to be with me. We're on the same team. I'm trained, you're training me training you is training me. So I'm serious. I'm learning a lot. But anyway, it's almost closing time. So let's go to 8:13. I watched as I heard an eagle that was flying in midair call out in a loud voice, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." Those are 3 whoas. Whoa, whoa, whoa. To the inhabitants of the earth, because of the trumpet blast about to be sounded by the other 3 angels. Okay. All right. Now we're going to 14:6. Then I saw another angel flying in midair. Now, notice the key word in all the scriptures. Mid-air. Okay? Mid-air. Right? The earth's atmosphere. He had the eternal gospel to proclaim to those who live on earth, to every nation, tribe, language, and people. He said in a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and the springs of water." Remember, wormwood hit the water. And the day is, 1/3 of the day is without light, and 1/3 of the night is without light, right? Okay. And the second angel, fallen is Babylon the Great. And then the third angel is, the cup of God's wrath to everyone who gets the mark of the beast, right? Okay. All right, so let's go to 19:17. And I saw an angel standing in the sun. Maybe that's why 1/3 of it went dark. And he cried in a loud voice to all the birds flying in midair, right? The eagles. He's talking to the eagles. "Come together right now over me. Gather together for the great supper of God, so that you may eat the flesh of kings, generals, and mighty men of horses and their riders, and the flesh of all people, free and slave, small and great." And then I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against the rider on the horse and his army, which is us. But the beast was captured, and with him the false prophet, who had performed the miraculous signs on his behalf. With these signs he deluded those who received the mark of the beast and worshipped his image. The 2 of them were thrown alive into the fiery lake of burning sulfur. The rest of them were killed by the sword, and came out of the mouth of the rider on the horse. And all the birds gorged themselves on their flesh. It's party time. It's party time. Time to party. Right. All right. Well, I've got one more thing to read you, and then I'm out. Okay. All right. In the same way, the Son of Man did not come to be served. He came to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many people. Matthew 20:28. The decision had been made. The troops had been deployed and the battleships were on their way. Nearly 3 million soldiers were preparing to slam against Hitler's Atlantic Wall in France. D-Day was set in motion. Responsibility for the invasion fell squarely upon the four-starred shoulders of General Dwight D. Eisenhower. The general spent the night before the attack with the men of the 101st Airborne. They called themselves the Screaming Eagles. Screaming Eagles! Yeah. As his men prepared their planes and checked their equipment, Ike went from soldier to soldier, offering words of encouragement. Many of the flyers were young enough to be his sons. He treated them like they were. A correspondent wrote that as Eisenhower watched the C-47s take off and disappear into the darkness, his hands were sunk deeply into his pockets and his eyes were full of tears. The general then went to his quarters and sat at his desk. He took a pen and paper and wrote a message which would be delivered to the White House in the event of a defeat. It was as brief as it was courageous. Our landings have failed. The troops, the air, and the Navy did all that bravery and devotion to duty could do. If any blame or fault attaches itself to the attempt, it was mine alone. It could be argued that the greatest act of courage that day was not in a cockpit or a foxhole, but at a desk when the one at the top took responsibility for the ones below. When the one in charge took the blame, even before the blame needed to be taken. Rare leader, this general. Unusual, this display of courage. He modeled a quality seldom seen in our society of lawsuits and dismissals and divorces. Most of us are willing to take credit for the good we do. Some are willing to take the rap for the bad we do, but few will assume responsibility for the mistakes of others. Still fewer will shoulder the blame for mistakes yet uncommitted. Eisenhower did. As a result, he became a hero. Jesus did. As a result, he's our Savior. Before the war begun, he forgave. Before a mistake could be made, forgiveness was offered. Before blame could be given, grace was provided. The one at the top took responsibility for the ones at the bottom. Read how Jesus describes what he came to do. The Son of Man did not come to serve. He came to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many. The phrase Son of Man conjured the same image for the Jews of Christ's era that the title General creates for you and me. It was a statement of authority and power. Consider all the titles Jesus could have used to define himself on earth. King of Kings, the great I am, the beginning and the end, the Lord of all, Jehovah, high and holy. All of these and a dozen others would have been appropriate. But Jesus didn't use them. Instead, he called himself the Son of Man. This title appears 82 times in the New Testament, 81 of which are in the Gospels, 80 of which are directly from the lips of Jesus. Now, it's also in the Old Testament in Ezekiel. I've been looking at Ezekiel along with Revelations. But anyway, to understand Jesus, we need to understand what his title means. If Jesus thought it was important enough to use over 80 times, it is certainly important enough for us to explore. Few would argue that the title is rooted in Daniel 7, a text which is just one frame of the cinematographic masterpiece. The seer is afforded a seat in a theater that features a peek at the future powers of the earth. The empires are portrayed as beasts, rabid, hungry, and vicious. The lion with the eagle's wings stands for Babylonia. The bear with 3 ribs in its mouth represents Medo-Persia. Alexander the Great is symbolized by a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads. And a 4th beast with iron teeth represents Rome. But as the scene unfolds, the empires fade. One by one, the world powers tumble. At the end, the conquering God, the Ancient of Days, receives into his presence the Son of Man. To him is entrusted authority, glory, and sovereign power. Picture him blazing white atop a gallant steed, a sword in his hand. To the Jew, the Son of Man was a symbol of triumph, the conqueror, the equalizer, the score settler, the big brother, the intimidator, the Starship Enterprise. And you thought my nicknames were bad. I gave him nicknames too. The right arm of the high and holy, the king who roared down from heaven in a fiery chariot of vengeance and anger towards those who oppressed God's holy people. The Son of Man was the 4-star general who called his army to invade and led his troops to victory. For that reason, when Jesus spoke of the Son of Man in terms of power, the people cheered. When he spoke of the new world where the Son of Man would sit on his glorious throne, the people understood. When he spoke of the Son of Man who would come on the clouds of heaven with great power and authority, the people could envision the scene. When he spoke of the Son of Man seated on the right hand of power, everyone could imagine that picture. But when he said the Son of Man would suffer, the people stood silent. This didn't fit the image. It's not what they expected. Put yourself in their place. You've been oppressed by the Roman government for years. Since your youth, you've been taught that the Son of Man would deliver you. Now he's here. Jesus calls himself the Son of Man. He proves he's the Son of Man. He can raise the dead. He can still a storm. The crowds of followers are growing. You are excited. Finally, the children of Abraham will be set free. But what is this he's saying? The Son of Man did not come to be served. He came to serve others. Earlier, he told them the Son of Man would be handed over to people and they'd kill him. After 3 days, he would be raised from the dead, or he would rise from the dead. Wait a minute. That's an impossible, incredible, intolerable contradiction of terms. No wonder the followers did not understand what Jesus meant. And they were afraid to ask him. The king who came to serve? The Son of Man being betrayed? The conqueror killed? An ambassador of the Ancient of Days mocked, spit on? But such is the irony of Jesus wearing the title, the Son of Man. It is also the irony of the cross. Calvary is a hybrid of God's lofty status and deep devotion. The thunderclap, which echoed when God's sovereignty collided with his love. The marriage of heaven's kingship and heaven's compassion. The very instrument of the cross is symbolic. The vertical beams of holiness intersecting with a horizontal bar of love. Jesus wears a sovereign crown, but bears a father's heart. He is a general who takes responsibility for his soldiers' mistakes. But Jesus didn't write a note. He paid a price. He didn't just assume the blame. He sees the sin. He became the ransom. He is the general who dies in place of the private, the king who suffers for the peasant, the master who sacrifices himself for the servant. He's the general who made provisions for his soldiers' mistakes. He is the Son of Man who came to serve and to give his life as a ransom for you. All right. It's almost closing time. Okay. I just want to say that God, the Lord Jesus, paid the price for every mistake that we've ever made, every mistake we've already made, and every mistake we're going to make. And the reason why is because we're not going to be able to play by the rules all the time. You know what I mean? The world has no rules, right? So it wasn't really fair to leave God's people in it with just dead religion, right? Because the world hates God's people. And they make their own rules up, don't they? They make their own words, and they redefine words, and they just make their own rules up as they go. So that doesn't make it very fair if religion forces you to play by the rules, right? Well, that's why Jesus had to die, because this day was coming, and he knew that the world's not going to play by rules. They're going to play ruthless and dirty. I mean, you got to do whatever you got to do to win. You know what I mean? Because that's what they're going to do. And I just want you to know that if you're on this team, that don't worry about the rules so much. Just keep yourself safe and test the spirits to make sure they're from God. Okay? If you have a blind spot, you should know it by now, because we've been training, and you should have that. You should have anything covered that wasn't covered right before. Because it's party time. All right. Well, guys, don't let go. Don't let go.